Daniel Moretti stopped his own wedding before the priest could finish the question, and the whole cathedral forgot how to breathe. 1 second, the city's most feared Mafia boss was standing beneath a ceiling painted with angels, facing a woman chosen for him by blood, money, and war. The next, his jaw tightened, his black eyes lifted from the diamond-covered bride in front of him, and he said, clear enough for every enemy in the room to hear, "I can't do this." The priest froze with his hand raised over the open book. Isabella Rinaldi stared at him through her lace veil, so still she looked like a painting someone had struck with a knife. Daniel's mother stood in the front row, wearing pearls, power, and the kind of smile that had buried men alive. Behind them, 2 Mafia families sat divided by an aisle of white roses, both sides pretending this marriage was holy when everyone knew it was a treaty with music. Daniel was supposed to say his vows. He was supposed to bind the Moretti name to the Rinaldi name. He was supposed to marry the elegant woman in front of him and save both empires from bleeding each other dry. Instead, he turned away from Isabella and looked toward the back of the church, where a woman in a simple navy dress stood half-hidden beside a stone column, clutching her small silver locket like she had been praying for the floor to open and swallow her before anyone noticed she existed. Amara Hale noticed everything too late. She noticed Daniel's eyes on her before she understood what his silence meant. She noticed the whisper moving through the pews like a match catching dry paper. She noticed Isabella's hands curling around her bouquet until white rose petals bent beneath her jeweled fingers. She noticed the guards along the walls shifting, not enough for most guests to see, but enough for a woman who had already survived one ambush with Daniel Moretti to understand that danger had posture. And then she noticed Daniel stepping down from the altar, not toward the aisle that led out, not toward his mother, not toward the Rinaldi men whose faces had gone hard with insult, toward her. Amara's heart made one wild, stupid sound inside her chest. She took half a step back, because common sense was still alive in her somewhere, even if it had been badly injured during the last 6 days. Daniel kept coming. The church was huge, all carved marble and candlelight, but with every step he took, the room seemed to shrink around him. He moved like a man who had been born being watched, and had stopped caring long ago what people saw. Cold, controlled, beautiful, in the dangerous way storms were beautiful from a distance, right before they broke windows and tore roofs from houses. "Daniel," Valeria Moretti said from the front row. She did not shout. She did not need to. Her voice cut through the church with the sharp quiet of a blade sliding free. "Return to the altar." Daniel did not stop. No, it was one word. It sounded like a war beginning. Amara's fingers tightened around her locket. She wanted to whisper his name, wanted to warn him, wanted to ask if he had completely lost his mind in front of God, 2 criminal empires, and at least 3 men who looked like they had brought hidden guns to a wedding out of habit. But her mouth had gone dry, and for once, the woman who always had a joke ready could not find a single useful word. Daniel reached her. For a moment, he only looked at her, and the whole room looked with him. His gaze moved over her face, like he was making sure she was real, like he had crossed the church not to perform some grand rebellion, but because something inside him had finally stopped obeying orders. Amara shook her head once, barely. "Don't do this," her eyes said. "Not here. Not for me." Daniel held out his hand. "Come with me." The room exploded into whispers. Amara stared at his hand as if it were a loaded gun wrapped in silk. "You are standing at your own wedding," she said under her breath. "I noticed. To another woman. I noticed that too." Daniel, his name came out softer than she meant it to. That softness hurt worse than panic. His face changed, just a little, but enough for her to see the man underneath the Moretti name. The man who had laughed once in an alley because she had called him dramatic while he was bleeding through an expensive shirt. The man who had looked at her like he had not been seen clearly in years. "I was about to make the worst mistake of my life," he said. "Then fix it quietly. It's too late for quiet." "It is never too late for quiet," Amara hissed. "People invented quiet for exactly this kind of situation." A sound moved through the guests, half shock, half disbelief, because apparently no one had expected the strange woman at the back of the church to argue with the groom while his abandoned bride stood at the altar turning slowly into ice. Daniel's mouth almost curved. Almost. It disappeared before anyone else could catch it. "You told me I looked miserable." Amara swallowed. "You did. You told me a man should not sign his whole life away just because dead men had already arranged the paperwork. I was speaking generally. You were speaking to me. Because you were standing in my hallway at 2 in the morning, asking if normal people kept cereal in 3 different boxes. You said I had rich man sadness. You did. You said I should marry someone who made me want to stay alive, not someone who made me look good in photographs." Amara closed her eyes for half a second. "I say many things when I am tired and underfed. You were right." The church went so silent after that. Even the candles seemed to hold still. Daniel Moretti, who had made governors speak carefully, who had made killers lower their eyes, who had never explained himself twice to anyone, stood in the aisle of his political wedding and admitted a woman in a navy dress had been right about his heart. Amara wanted to vanish. She also wanted to cry. She also wanted, foolishly, terribly, to take his hand. Because for 6 impossible days, Daniel had been walking toward this moment, even when neither of them had wanted to name it. It had begun with tires screaming against wet pavement and the sharp crack of gunfire between 2 parked delivery vans on Grand Street. Amara had been leaving the City Records Annex, carrying a paper bag full of stale muffins from the break room, because refusing free food went against her deepest moral beliefs. She had been thinking about rent, her father's old locket, and whether her downstairs neighbor's cat had once again stolen her mail. She had not been thinking about Mafia alliances, black cars, or Daniel Moretti ducking behind a stone planter with blood on his sleeve and murder in his eyes. At first, she had not known it was him. She only knew a man in a charcoal suit had shoved her behind a newsstand as bullets shattered the window above her head. "Stay down," he had ordered. Amara had stared at him from the wet sidewalk, one muffin crushed under her palm, her heart trying to climb out through her throat. "That is a beautiful suggestion," she said. "Do you have another one where we are not being shot at?" His gaze snapped to her. "You're bleeding." "That is jam." He looked down at the red smear on her coat. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm choosing optimism." Another bullet hit the side of a parked car. Glass rained across the curb. The man leaned out, fired twice, and someone across the street cursed in pain. Amara should have screamed. She should have frozen. Maybe she did freeze for 1 second, because fear has teeth, and hers had closed around her lungs. But then she saw the black SUV at the end of the street, saw 2 men moving around the back of it, saw the delivery truck idling near the curb with keys still hanging from the ignition. Her brain, which had spent 7 years organizing old legal records, noticing missing signatures, mismatched dates, and suspiciously corrected property files, did what it always did under pressure. It sorted the chaos. "The truck," she said. "What?" "Delivery truck. Keys inside." Driver ran into the bakery. Side door open. If you shoot the streetlight, the glass drops onto the hood of their car. They flinch. We run. I drive. The man stared at her. "You drive?" "Not well when judged." "Can you drive under gunfire?" "I have driven in Boston." For half a second, despite the blood, rain, and death around them, he looked confused enough to be human. Then he shot the streetlight. The glass fell exactly where she thought it would. The men by the SUV ducked. Daniel grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt, just enough to move fast. They ran through rain and broken light, Amara slipping once and nearly taking him down with her. I am not built for graceful escapes, she snapped. You are doing fine. Do not patronize me while people are trying to make holes in us. He opened the driver's door and pushed her inside. She slammed the truck into gear, hit the curb, nearly killed a mailbox, and drove the wrong way down a narrow side street, while Daniel fired out the passenger window with the calm irritation of a man handling a scheduled delay. Left, he said. There is a one-way sign. Left. I love how crime really opens up the traffic options. She turned left. A car horn blared. Daniel looked at her, rain on his lashes, blood darkening his sleeve. Who are you? A woman having a very bad lunch break. Your name? Why, so you can send me a thank you fruit basket if we survive. So, I know what to call you. She hit the brakes as a garbage truck blocked the road ahead. Behind them, headlights swung into the alley. The shooters had followed. Call me useful and tell me where to go. His eyes moved past her, calculating. Back up. There is a car behind us. I know. You want me to ram them. Gently. That is not how ramming works. Amara. She turned to him sharply. How did you know my name? Your work badge. She glanced down. Her badge had twisted forward on its lanyard. Amara Hale, records clerk. Perfect. Even during an ambush, bureaucracy had betrayed her. Fine, she said. Hold on, Mr. Whoever you are. Daniel. The name landed a second before she reversed the truck into the car behind them, hard enough to make both men inside shout. Daniel Moretti. Even Amara knew that name. Everybody in the city knew that name. Mothers whispered it when sons took stupid loans. Judges refused to say it in court unless they had to. Reporters used it when they wanted clicks and lawsuits. Amara looked at him, horrified. You're Daniel Moretti. Drive. I just saved a Mafia boss. Drive, Amara. This is exactly why I don't leave my desk. By the time they reached a quiet loading dock behind an abandoned furniture warehouse, Amara's hands were shaking so badly she could barely pull them off the wheel. Daniel got out first, checked the street, then opened her door. You're safe. She laughed once, sharp and breathless. That is a very ambitious statement from a man bleeding near my shoes. His eyes dropped to his sleeve, as if he had forgotten about the bullet graze. It's nothing. Of course it's nothing. Rich men are always bleeding for aesthetic reasons. He looked at her again, really looked, and she felt it like a light turning on in a room she had not meant to enter. Amara was used to being looked at, but not like this. Most people did one of three things when they saw her. They softened too much, like her full body made her a sad little lesson about confidence. They dismissed her, as if her size meant she would accept any insult wrapped in a joke. Or they stared through her, deciding she did not belong in rooms with polished people and expensive lighting. Daniel did none of those things. He looked at her as if she had surprised him, as if surprise was rare. As if he liked it. That was worse than fear. Fear made sense. This did not. You're hurt, he said. I told you it's jam. Your hand. She looked down. A slice of glass had cut across her palm, thin but bright with blood. Oh! The moment she saw it, pain appeared, rude and dramatic. Daniel took a clean handkerchief from his pocket and reached for her. Amara pulled back. I can do it. He stopped instantly. No irritation, no command, just stillness. Then he held the cloth out instead of taking her hand. Then do it. That was the first thing that made her trust him more than she wanted to. Not his name, not his money. Not the way he had stood between her and bullets. It was the fact that when she said no, he believed her. He should have disappeared after that. Men like Daniel Moretti did not keep speaking to women who accidentally became useful during assassination attempts. They sent money, threats, or silence, sometimes all three. Instead, he sent one of his men to return her abandoned purse, her broken glasses, and the paper bag of muffins, though two were crushed beyond hope. Inside the bag was also a new phone with only one number saved. Amara stared at it for a full minute before calling. Daniel answered on the first ring. "Are you safe? You bought me a phone." "Yes. That is not normal. Neither was today. You also returned the muffins. You seemed attached to them. They were free." "I see. No, you don't. That is why you returned them with a phone that costs more than my sofa. Is your sofa comfortable? Do not buy me a sofa." Silence. Then, quietly, "I wasn't going to. You were thinking it." "I was thinking several things." "Think cheaper." He went silent again, and this time she heard something beneath it. Not amusement. Not exactly. Something close to relief. "Are you always this difficult?" "Only when kidnapped by circumstance." "No one kidnapped you." "I was very much taken hostage by your lifestyle." Another pause. Then the sound came. A laugh. Small. Surprised. Gone almost before it arrived. But Amara heard it, and for reasons she did not want to examine, it warmed her more than the tea going cold beside her sink. After that, the days turned strange. Daniel told himself he was only checking whether she had been followed. Amara told herself she was only answering because ignoring a mafia boss seemed bad for long-term health. Neither of them believed themselves for long. He called once the next evening, then twice the day after that. By the third day, he appeared outside the records annex in a black car with tinted windows and the expression of a man who had convinced himself this was security work. Amara came down the steps, carrying 3 file boxes stacked against her chest. "Absolutely not," she said before he opened the door. Daniel looked at the boxes. "Do you greet everyone that way?" "Only men who park like a threat. I'm here because Crane's men may still be searching for you." The name made her fingers tighten around the cardboard. Silas Crane. Even clerks knew that name in pieces. It appeared around shell companies, sealed property disputes, waterfront permits, and unexplained fires that somehow always helped the wrong people become richer. Amara had seen it in files more than once. She had seen it recently too, though she had not understood why her father's old locket had begun to feel heavier against her chest every time that name appeared. "I can take the bus." No, that sounded less like a suggestion and more like a rich man's symptom. "Amara, Daniel." He looked at the boxes again. "At least let me carry those. I said I can take the bus, not that I have married my suffering. Take the top one." He took all 3. That was not the assignment. "They're heavy. So am I. People manage not to lift me without asking." The words were out before she could soften them. She hated that tiny silence after, the one people entered when they realized they had accidentally stepped on an old bruise. Daniel did not apologize too quickly. He did not pretend not to understand. He simply set 2 boxes back into her arms and kept one. "You're right." Amara looked at him. "I usually am, but it is nice when men catch up." He brought her coffee that tasted expensive and wrong. She made him drink bodega coffee that tasted like burnt pennies and pride. He asked how a records clerk noticed ambush routes faster than trained men. She told him trained men often ignored boring things, and boring things were where the truth liked to hide. He asked about her locket. She closed her fingers around it and said it had belonged to her father. He heard the wall in her voice and did not push. That was the second thing that made her trust him. By the 5th day, he knew she liked cinnamon in coffee, hated being called brave because it sounded like a consolation prize, and spoke to street cats as if they were unreliable co-workers. She knew he hated sweet things but kept eating half the pastry she pretended not to share. She knew he wore coldness like armor, but listened more carefully than men who smiled too much. She knew he was getting married on Saturday because the entire city knew. His face had not changed when she first mentioned it, but the air had. "Isabella Rinaldi is beautiful," Amara said, sitting across from him in the back booth of a closed Italian bakery, whose owner had apparently decided Daniel Moretti could use the place after hours without needing to explain why. "Yes." "That is a terrible answer." "It's accurate." "Is she kind?" He looked down at his untouched espresso. Kindness was not part of the negotiation. Amara watched him in the soft yellow light. This man who could order violence with a nod, but looked trapped by a wedding invitation printed on cream paper. Do you love her? Daniel's mouth tightened. No. Does she love you? No. Lovely. Nothing says sacred union like mutual emotional absence. It protects my family. Does it protect you? He looked at her then. Really looked. That has never been the point. Amara felt something ache quietly behind her ribs. Maybe it should be. He did not answer. Outside, rain washed the windows and made the city blur into gold and black. Amara should have left the silence alone. She was good at that at work. She filed documents in silence. She listened to supervisors dismiss her in silence. She let strangers make little comments about her body, her clothes, her confidence, her lunch, and she smiled because correcting people took energy she rarely had to spare. But Daniel Moretti brought out the reckless part of her, the part that had reversed a truck into armed men and complained about traffic signs during a gunfight. You look miserable when people mention the wedding, she said. Many grooms do. Not like they're walking politely toward a grave. His hand went still around the cup. Careful. No. The word surprised them both. Amara sat back, heart beating harder. No, actually, I was careful for years. Careful with bosses, careful with bills, careful with men who thought calling me confident meant they could also call me too much. Careful with every room where I knew I did not match the furniture. And maybe I am tired of watching people walk into cages because the cage has good lighting. Daniel stared at her. The bakery hummed quietly around them. You think my marriage is a cage. I think you do. His expression became unreadable. You've known me 5 days. Yes, and that is embarrassing for everyone who has known you longer. For a second, his eyes softened. Then he looked away, and she knew she had reached something true, because powerful men only looked away when truth was too intimate to punish. You should go home, Amara. She nodded, because she had already said too much. You should marry someone who makes you want to stay, she said quietly. Not someone who helps everyone else sleep better. Then she left him there with rain against the windows, and his own name sitting around his neck like a chain. The next day, he did not call. Amara told herself she was relieved. Relief apparently felt a lot like staring at her phone every 7 minutes and insulting herself for it. She went to work, misfiled 3 city permit requests, corrected them, spilled coffee on a copy machine, apologized to it because it sounded tired, and spent her lunch break in the basement archive, trying to focus on the strange set of financial records she had accidentally uncovered weeks earlier. It had started as a routine retrieval. A sealed property transfer connected to an old Rinaldi warehouse had been requested under the wrong index code. Amara had gone hunting through misdated storage logs, and there it was, hidden behind dull language and dusty binders. Money moving through dead companies, charitable fronts paying storage firms that owned no storage units, Crane's name appearing where it had no reason to appear, and beneath one scanned page, a notation in her father's handwriting. Her father had been dead for 12 years. Thomas Hale had been a careful man, a quiet accountant who taught Amara how to balance checkbooks, read contracts, and never trust a document that looked too clean. The official story said he was killed during a robbery outside a train station. Amara had believed that because grief often accepted the first story it was given, just to survive the night. But the locket he left her had begun to feel less like a keepsake and more like a question, especially after she found a file code scratched lightly into the inside of the silver backing, so small she had missed it for years. She had not told Daniel. She had not told anyone, not because she trusted no one. Because she had learned the hard way that truth was heavy and people were quick to drop what they could not carry. So when Daniel's wedding morning arrived, Amara dressed in navy because black felt dramatic and red felt like she was asking to be murdered by a bride. She told herself she was only going to witness the end of a strange week. She told herself Daniel Moretti would marry Isabella Rinaldi, the families would applaud, the alliance would be sealed, and Amara would return to her apartment with her locket, her records, and the ridiculous memory of being looked at by a man who should have forgotten her. She almost did not enter the church. A guard at the door looked at her body, then her simple dress, then the guest list, and his expression said what people often said without words. "You are not the kind of woman who belongs here." Before he could speak, another guard leaned close and murmured something in his ear. The first guard went pale and stepped aside. Amara walked in, chin high, pulse in her throat. "Great," she whispered to herself. "Even the guest list has Mafia energy." Now Daniel stood before her, with his hand extended, while the wedding he had abandoned trembled behind him like a bomb deciding when to go off. Amara looked from his hand to his face. "You do understand that if I take your hand, half the room may blame me for the collapse of organized crime diplomacy. They will blame you either way. Comforting. I won't let them hurt you. Daniel, that is not something one man gets to promise in a room full of angry criminals. I am not one man in this room." She looked past him at his guards, at the Moretti men standing with hands near their jackets, at the Rinaldi men staring like wolves cheated of meat. "That is part of the problem." Daniel stepped closer, still not touching her. "Then let me say it differently. I won't let them shame you alone." That landed where nothing else could. Amara had been alone in many rooms. Alone when teachers praised her cleverness, but warned her to be less loud. Alone when relatives told her pretty would come if she tried harder. Alone when her father died and people brought casseroles but not answers. Alone when men laughed at her confidence like it was a trick. Daniel, for all his danger, had understood the shape of that loneliness with one sentence. Her eyes burned. She hated him a little for that. "You are a disaster," she whispered. "Yes, a handsome disaster, which is worse because people forgive things with cheekbones. Amara." His voice dropped, and beneath the church's watching silence, it felt like a private room. "Take my hand if you want to leave. If you don't, I will still walk away from this altar." Her breath caught. That was the third thing. Not the rescue, the choice. He was not making her the reason for his refusal. He was refusing the lie first. She only had to decide whether to stand beside him after. Amara took his hand. The church erupted. Isabella made a sound too quiet to be called a gasp, and too sharp to be called a breath. Valeria Moretti stepped into the aisle, her pearls glowing against her black dress, her beauty carved from the same cold stone as the cathedral pillars. "Release her," Valeria said. "No," Daniel replied. "You humiliate the Rinaldis, insult this family, and shame your father's name for a woman you met less than a week ago?" Amara lifted one finger. "Technically, 6 days. I feel accuracy matters in emotional disasters." Several heads turned toward her. One of Daniel's guards coughed into his fist. Daniel did not look away from his mother, but Amara felt his thumb move once against her hand, almost like the memory of a smile. Valeria's eyes cut to her. "You find this amusing?" "No," Amara said. "I find it terrifying. Humor is just what my mouth does when my soul leaves my body. You do not belong here." Daniel's hand tightened, but Amara squeezed back first, a warning. Not yet. She knew that kind of insult. She could handle that kind of insult. It had worn different dresses her entire life. "You're right," Amara said. "I don't belong in a room where love is treated like bad accounting." A few guests sucked in air. Isabella's veil trembled as she turned fully toward them. "Love," she repeated, soft and poisonous. "How sweet. Did he tell you that while buying whatever dress you wore to my wedding?" Amara looked down at herself. "No, I bought this dress on sale, and it has pockets, so honestly I'm the most prepared woman here." Daniel closed his eyes for half a second, as if praying for patience or strength, or both. Isabella stepped down from the altar. Every movement was perfect. Her gown followed her like white fire, expensive and furious. Up close, she was even more beautiful, with smooth dark hair beneath her veil, and eyes bright with public humiliation. Amara could almost pity her. Almost, because Isabella's gaze moved over Amara's body with such deliberate cruelty that pity died before it reached the surface. "This is what you choose?" Isabella asked Daniel. "This clerk? This outsider? This woman who looks like she wandered in because someone mentioned cake?" The words hit exactly where they were meant to hit. Amara felt the old sting, quick and familiar. Not new pain, old pain wearing fresh lipstick. Before she could answer, Daniel moved one step forward. The air changed so fast, the front rows leaned back. "Careful," he said. Isabella's face flushed. "You don't get to threaten me because I told the truth. You didn't tell the truth." His voice was quiet, too quiet. "You reached for the easiest weapon in the room, because you have nothing sharper." "Daniel," Valeria warned. He ignored her. His eyes remained on Isabella. "You can insult me. You can hate me. You can call this alliance broken and demand whatever payment your father thinks humiliation is worth. But you will not stand in a church and speak about Amara's body as if beauty is a debt she owes you." Amara forgot how to breathe. She had defended herself before, many times, with jokes, with silence, with exits, with smiles that felt like chipped glass. But she had almost never seen someone else stand between her and the insult without making her feel like the insult had won. Daniel did not sound embarrassed for her. He sounded offended by the room. Isabella's eyes glittered. "You think she loves you? She loves what you are." Amara laughed before she could stop herself. It came out bright, wrong, and entirely her. "I'm sorry. Have you met him? He is very stressful." Daniel looked at her. "Stressful. Deeply. I saved your life. After your life endangered mine, that cancels out." A ripple moved through the pews, confused and unwillingly fascinated. Daniel's expression shifted in that almost invisible way again. The room did not know what to do with a woman who argued with him like he was a man and not a loaded crown. That was why he had walked away from the altar. Not because Amara was polished. She was not. Not because she was safe. Nothing about this was safe. Not because she fit. She did not fit. And somehow that had become the first honest thing in the room. "She does not love my power," Daniel said, turning back to Isabella. "She questions it every chance she gets." "Because she is stupid," Isabella snapped. "No," Daniel said, "because she is not afraid of being unimpressed." Amara's throat tightened. That line entered her gently and stayed. Valeria's face hardened. "Enough. Daniel, come with me now. We will discuss this privately before you finish destroying everything your father built." Daniel looked at his mother then, and for the first time all afternoon, grief moved across his face. Small, controlled, but real. "My father did not build this family so I could marry a lie." "Your father understood duty. My father understood regret." Valeria went still. The mention of Marco Moretti changed the church more than gunfire could have. Men who had been whispering stopped. Older women crossed themselves. Even the Rinaldis looked uneasy. Marco's name had power not because he had been feared, though he had been, but because after his death people had turned him into whatever story served them best. To Valeria, he was duty. To the Moretti soldiers, he was strength. To Daniel, maybe he was a ghost with unfinished warnings. Amara did not know. She only knew Daniel's hand had gone colder in hers. "Do not use your father to excuse weakness," Valeria said. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This is not weakness. You would give up an empire for a woman who has no blood, no standing, no understanding of what waits outside these doors." "Yes." He did not hesitate. The word rolled through the cathedral like thunder. Valeria stared at him, and for one naked second, behind the fury, Amara saw fear. Not fear of Amara, fear of losing the son she had raised to never choose himself. "Then you will not be head of this family," Valeria said. "If you walk out of here with her, you walk out without my blessing, without the council's support, and without the protection of the Moretti name." The silence after that was not empty. It was crowded with knives. Amara felt Daniel's guards tense. She felt the Rinaldis watching closely, hungry for the fracture. She felt every person in the church waiting to see whether love would survive the price of being named aloud. Daniel looked at his mother for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was softer. That made it worse. "Then I lose the empire." Amara turned to him. "Daniel," he looked down at her, "I would rather lose power than spend my life married to a lie." "You cannot say things like that in public," she whispered. "Apparently I can. You are impossible. You keep saying that, because you keep becoming more impossible." He would have led her out then. Maybe the room would have erupted. Maybe the alliance would have shattered into blood before the first candle burned down. Maybe Isabella's father, seated rigid in the front pew, with his silver cane across his knees, would have given a signal no one could take back. But before Daniel could take another step, an elderly man rose from the second row of the Moretti side. Lorenzo Bellini moved slowly, but not weakly. He had white hair, a narrow face, and the kind of presence that made even armed men part for him without thinking. Amara had seen him once before from a distance outside Daniel's office, speaking softly while Daniel listened with rare attention. He was not family by blood, but everyone seemed to understand he carried something older than rank. "Daniel," Lorenzo said, "there is something your father left for this day." Valeria's head turned sharply. "Lorenzo." He did not look at her. He reached inside his jacket and removed a sealed cream envelope, thick and aged, marked with a black wax seal pressed with the Moretti crest. The sight of it made Daniel go completely still. "Marco gave this to me 3 months before he died," Lorenzo said. "He ordered me to keep it hidden until the day you stood at the altar." Daniel stared at the envelope. "Why was I never told?" "Because your father knew many people would try to stop you from hearing him." Valeria's face had gone pale beneath her careful makeup. "This is not the time." Lorenzo finally looked at her, and there was old sadness in his eyes. "It is exactly the time." That was his instruction. Isabella let out a cold laugh. How convenient. A dead man arrives with permission the moment Daniel needs an excuse. Lorenzo turned toward her. He did not raise his voice. "Careful, Miss Rinaldi. The dead hear more than brides think." No one laughed. Daniel released Amara's hand, only long enough to take the envelope. The absence of his fingers around hers felt strangely loud. He broke the seal. The paper inside trembled once in his hand, not because he was afraid, because some wounds do not close, just because a man learns to command rooms. Amara looked away, giving him privacy, in the only way she could, though hundreds of people watched. Daniel read silently at first. His expression did not change. Then it did. A tiny fracture moved through his control. His eyes lifted toward the altar, toward the Rinaldis, toward his mother, then back to the page. "Read it aloud," Lorenzo said softly. Valeria whispered, "No." Daniel's voice, when it came, was low and rough around the edges. "My son, if you are reading this, then you are standing where I once stood, with a family's future placed in your hands, and your own heart treated like the least important thing in the room." The church seemed to lean in. Even Isabella stopped breathing sharply and stood frozen with her bouquet hanging at her side. Daniel continued, "I spent my life teaching you control because I feared what the world would do if you had none. But control is not the same as surrender. Duty is not the same as obedience. And a marriage made only for power becomes a quiet grave, even when everyone calls it victory." Amara's eyes burned again. She did not want them to. She did not know Marco Moretti. She did not know what kind of father wrote a letter like that and hid it inside a wedding day, like a match inside a wall. But she knew what it was to receive truth late and still need it. Daniel paused. His thumb pressed against the paper. Lorenzo watched him with grief. Valeria looked like every sentence was being pulled from her own chest. Daniel read on. If your heart belongs elsewhere, do not bury it to feed this family's pride. The Moretti name has survived bullets, prison, betrayal, and fire. It will not survive another generation of men mistaking lovelessness for strength. A whisper moved through the younger Moretti men in the side pews. Some looked at Daniel differently now, not softer, deeper, as if the ghost of Marco had given words to something they had never dared think. Daniel swallowed once. There is more. Lorenzo nodded. Daniel's eyes moved back to the page, and whatever tenderness the letter had brought into the room began to darken. Be wary of any alliance that arrives wrapped too perfectly. The Rinaldis have worn loyalty like a good suit, but I saw stains beneath the fabric before I died. I lacked proof. I lacked time. I trusted the wrong men and paid for it. If this letter reaches you before you bind yourself to them, look beyond the wedding flowers. Look at the ledgers. Look at the warehouses. Look at the charities that move money without children, medicine without patients, shipments without weight. Amara's blood went cold. Her hand closed around the locket so quickly the chain bit into the back of her neck. Shipments without weight, charities, warehouses. The same strange phrases she had seen buried in files that no ordinary clerk was supposed to understand. Daniel felt her movement. His eyes flicked to her, sharp with immediate attention, then returned to the page. One day, he read, slower now, someone outside our world may see what we taught ourselves to miss. Do not dismiss that person because they lack our name. Do not shame them because they do not look like power. The truth often survives by hiding in places proud men forget to search. Amara's knees nearly weakened. The whole room blurred for one heartbeat, not with tears this time, but recognition. Her father's locket felt hot beneath her hand. For 12 years, it had been memory, then mystery. Now it felt like evidence. Isabella's father rose slowly from the front pew. His silver cane struck the marble once. This is insulting. Daniel lowered the letter. His face had changed completely. The groom who had stopped a wedding for love was gone. In his place stood the Moretti boss, cold enough to frighten the candles. Sit down, Rinaldi. The older man's mouth tightened. You would accuse my family based on a dead man's paranoia? I have not accused you yet. Daniel's eyes moved to Amara, but I think I know who he was talking about. Every face turned to her again. This time, the whispers felt different. Not mockery. Not just shock. Suspicion. Curiosity. Fear. Amara wanted to step back, but the column was already behind her. Daniel came closer, shielding part of her body from the room, without fully blocking her from it. He knew, somehow, that hiding her would make it worse. He only gave her enough space to breathe. Amara, he said quietly, what did you find? She tried to laugh. It failed. Her voice came out thin. That is a very big question for a wedding. Tell me. The words were gentle, but the room around them was not. Isabella stared with open hatred. Valeria stared like a woman, watching her family history rearrange itself. Lorenzo's eyes had gone strangely soft, as if he had been waiting years for a door to open and had not known what shape the key would take. Amara looked at Daniel, and for 1 second she was back in the rain with broken glass on her palm, being offered a handkerchief by a dangerous man who stopped when she said she could do it herself. She could still choose silence. She could still walk away. Maybe, maybe not. But her father had died with secrets hidden inside a locket, and Daniel had just burned his whole future rather than marry a lie. So Amara took a breath, reached behind her neck, and unclasped the silver chain. The locket looked small in her palm, too small to hold anything powerful enough to shake a room full of killers and queens. It was oval, scratched near the hinge, with a tiny blue stone set into the front. Daniel looked at it as if he already understood that the smallest things were often the hardest to destroy. "My father was an accountant," Amara said. Her voice shook at first, then steadied, because fear, like arrogance, became boring if it stayed too long. "He died when I was 16. I was told it was a robbery. I believed that because I wanted to believe the world was random instead of cruel." Isabella's father shifted. Amara saw it. Daniel saw her seeing it. "A few weeks ago," she continued, "I found old financial records in the city archive, Rinaldi warehouses, charitable transfers, storage companies with no storage, medical supply shipments that paid out but never arrived where the paperwork claimed. I didn't know what all of it meant. I still don't. But some of the file codes matched markings inside this locket." "You expect us to believe that?" Isabella snapped. Amara looked at her. "No, Isabella. I expected to eat reception food quietly and leave before anyone noticed I wore comfortable shoes." A nervous sound moved through the room. Not laughter exactly. Something close enough to make Isabella's eyes flash. Amara opened the locket with her thumbnail. Inside, behind the faded photograph of her father, was a thin inner plate she had only recently learned to loosen. Beneath it sat a black data chip, no bigger than a fingernail. The church seemed to inhale. Daniel did not touch it. He looked at Amara first. "May I?" She nodded. Only then did he take the locket from her hand. The moment the chip caught the light, three things happened at once. Isabella whispered something to her father. Valeria sat down as if her legs had finally given up carrying pride, and one of the Rinaldi guards near the side door moved his hand under his jacket. Daniel did not look in his direction. He only said, "Don't." The guard froze. Daniel's men did not. In less than a breath, every Moretti guard in the church had shifted into position, calm, silent, and ready. The guests realized it slowly, then all at once. The wedding had become something else. Not a ceremony, not a scandal. A trap, opening from the inside. Daniel handed the chip to Lorenzo, without taking his eyes off the Rinaldis. "Find a secure reader." Lorenzo closed his fingers around it. "Already prepared." "Of course you are," Amara whispered, because fear had made her mouth independent again. Daniel glanced at her. "Are you all right?" "No." "Good." "Good? You'd lie if you said yes." She stared at him. "This is not the time to be emotionally observant. It may be the only time." The softness in his voice nearly broke her. Around them, the church buzzed with terror, pretending to be gossip. The priest had stepped back from the altar and looked like he was reconsidering every wedding he had ever agreed to perform. Isabella stood alone in white, no longer the bride of an alliance, but the daughter of a family, named in a dead man's warning. Valeria looked at Amara again. Something in her face had shifted, not into kindness, not yet, but into the first painful crack of doubt. Daniel turned toward the room with Amara beside him. This time, when he reached for her hand, she took it without needing to be asked. Not because she felt safe. Safety was too simple a word for standing in a cathedral full of armed enemies while holding evidence that might explain her father's murder. She took his hand because she was no longer only the woman he had chosen in front of everyone. She was the woman who had accidentally carried a key into the center of a war and had finally stopped pretending she could return it politely and go home. Daniel looked at the Rinaldi family, then at his own. "No one leaves," he said. The words settled over the church with a cold finality that made even the flowers seem less innocent. Amara's pulse thundered in her ears. 6 days earlier, she had been a records clerk with a cheap lunch, a dead father's necklace, and no idea why certain files made powerful names repeat in the dark. Now the most feared man in the city had left his bride at the altar, chosen her in front of everyone, and uncovered the first edge of a betrayal that had been waiting for years. She should have been terrified. She was terrified. But beneath that fear, quiet and impossible, something else opened. Wonder. Because Daniel Moretti had not walked away from one life just to pull her into another cage. He had stopped at the edge of disaster, offered his hand, and let her decide whether to stand with him. And as Lorenzo disappeared through a side door with the data chip hidden in his fist, Amara understood that the wedding was not the end of anything. It was the first door, and whatever waited behind it had already started reaching back. The first door opened into a narrow stone hallway behind the altar, and the moment Lorenzo vanished through it with the data chip hidden in his fist, the church changed from a wedding into a room full of people pretending they were not afraid. No one moved at first, not the priest, who still held his little book against his chest, like scripture could stop bullets. Not Isabella, who stood in the middle of the aisle in her white dress, with her face so still it looked painted on. Not Valeria, who sat in the front pew with one hand pressed against her pearls, as if the necklace had suddenly become too tight. Not the Rinaldi men, who watched Daniel with the cold eyes of people measuring how much violence a room could hold before it spilled. Even the flowers seemed guilty now. The white roses, the gold ribbons, the candles, the polished marble, all of it had been arranged to make a lie look holy. Amara stood beside Daniel, with her hand still in his, and for the first time since he had walked away from the altar, she understood that the most dangerous part was not that he had chosen her. It was that the room had now seen she mattered, not as gossip, not as embarrassment, as evidence. Daniel felt the change before she did. His thumb moved once against her knuckles, small and steady, a silent message only she could hear. Stay still. Stay with me. Amara wanted to obey, which annoyed her, because obedience had never sat comfortably in her body. But she also wanted to live, and living currently seemed attached to Daniel Moretti's very expensive sleeve. I need you to breathe, he said softly, without looking down at her. I am breathing. You are arguing. That is different. It is multitasking. His eyes stayed on the room, but the corner of his mouth moved for half a second. It was gone before anyone else could see it. Somehow that tiny, almost smile helped more than any promise of protection would have. Promises were easy. Tiny smiles in the middle of disaster were rare. Daniel, Valeria said, and her voice had changed. It was no longer a command. It was sharper than fear, but not as strong as certainty. Whatever that chip contains, this cannot happen here. Daniel looked at his mother. It already happened here. You are humiliating this family in front of enemies. No, he said. Our enemies came dressed as family. That is different. A murmur moved through the pews. Isabella's father, Carlo Rinaldi, stood with both hands on the head of his silver cane. He was old, but not soft. His suit was pale gray, his hair swept back, his face narrow and proud. He looked like a man who had spent his whole life letting younger men bleed for him and calling it strategy. This is madness, Carlo said. A frightened little clerk waves around an old trinket, and you stop a sacred union. Amara lifted her eyebrows. I am standing right here. Carlo's eyes turned to her slowly. They did not look at her the way Daniel looked at her. They slid over her, measuring and dismissing in the same glance. Yes, he said, that appears to be part of the problem. Daniel took one step forward, and several men on both sides shifted at once. Amara caught his hand tighter. Don't. His gaze dropped to her. He insulted you. Everyone has been insulting me. At this point I should start charging admission. Amara, if you break an old man in a church, people will say I ruined the wedding mood. Daniel stared at her. The church was silent enough for people in the third row to hear every word. That was probably bad. Amara kept going, because fear had stolen her filter and thrown it somewhere unreachable. Also, I would like to know what is on the chip before anyone begins the dramatic murder portion of the evening. A sound came from one of Daniel's guards. It might have been a cough. It might have been laughter dying heroically. Daniel exhaled through his nose, then turned back to Carlo. You heard her. Carlo's face darkened. You let this woman speak for you now? No, Daniel said. I listen when she speaks. You should try it. It may save your life. Isabella laughed then, brittle and bright. This is unbelievable. You have known her less than a week, and suddenly she is your conscience, your witness, and your bride? Amara flinched at the last word, not because it was cruel, but because part of her heart reacted before sense could stop it. Bride. No, that was ridiculous. She was not his bride. She was a records clerk in a sale dress with sore feet, a father's murder in her necklace, and a talent for saying the wrong thing in wealthy rooms. Daniel seemed to feel the flinch through her hand. His voice dropped. She has agreed to nothing except standing here. Isabella's eyes narrowed. How noble. You destroy my wedding and then pretend to be careful with her feelings. Our wedding was already destroyed, Daniel said. I only stopped pretending it was alive. That struck Isabella harder than he intended. Amara saw it. Beneath the fury, beneath the pride, beneath the cruelty sharpened by humiliation, Isabella was also trapped. Not the same way, not gently enough to excuse her, but trapped all the same, in a dress chosen by an empire, promised to a man who did not love her, raised to believe being desired by power was the same as being valued. Her mouth trembled once before she turned it into a sneer. You will regret this. Probably, Amara muttered. Daniel looked down at her, not helping. I am providing balance. I do not need balance. You absolutely need balance. You are one intense stare away from becoming a painting called Man Makes Terrible Choices Near Flowers. A few guests blinked at her, like she had spoken another language. Daniel's eyes warmed despite everything, and that warmth scared her more than Carlo's cane, Isabella's rage, or Valeria's disappointed stare. Because rage made sense. Warmth asked for something. It asked her to believe that Daniel's hand around hers was not only strategy. That he had really chosen her in a room where choosing her cost him everything. She did not have time to think about that. She could not afford to think about that. Not when Lorenzo was somewhere behind the altar opening a data chip her dead father had hidden for 12 years. Not when Rinaldi men were watching the exits. Not when Silas Crane's name hung in her mind, like a shadow no candle could reach. The side door opened again. Lorenzo returned with a small black tablet in one hand, the locket chain looped around his fingers, and a face so pale that even Daniel went still. Behind him came a younger man with glasses, nervous hands, and a small silver case tucked under his arm. He looked like he belonged in a server room, not a church full of criminals. Marco Moretti was right, Lorenzo said. No one breathed. Daniel's voice went cold. Show me. Lorenzo looked at the room, then at the priest, then at the stained glass above the altar where painted saints looked down with bright blue eyes. Some of this should not be shown in public. They made the lie public, Daniel said. The truth can stand in the same room. Lorenzo nodded once and handed the tablet to him. Daniel released Amara's hand only because he had to. The moment he did, she felt exposed. One of his guards noticed and quietly moved nearer, not blocking her, just placing himself close enough that no one could reach her without going through him first. It was careful, silent, not showy. Daniel's people were learning from him, or maybe from her. Daniel looked at the screen. His eyes moved once, twice, then stopped. Something in his face changed. Not shock. Shock was too soft. This was recognition arriving too late and bringing a blade with it. How much? He asked. Lorenzo's voice was heavy. Years of transfers, shell charities, port storage, medical supply fronts, Rinaldi accounts moving money through Moretti contracts without authorization. Carlo slammed the cane against the floor. Fabrications. Lorenzo did not even look at him. There are invoices with your private seal. Seals can be copied. Daniel turned the tablet slightly, and the dark screen reflected candlelight across his face. "There are voice notes." Carlo's jaw closed. The room knew then. Not the details, not yet. But the truth had weight, and everyone felt it land. Isabella looked at her father. "Papa?" He did not look back. That told her enough. Amara's stomach twisted. Voice notes? Daniel's gaze moved to her. For the first time since Lorenzo returned, his control cracked. He did not want her to hear what came next. That meant she needed to. "Play it," she said. "Amara." "No." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "If my father died for this, I don't want everyone else deciding what I can survive hearing." Daniel held her eyes for a long moment. In that look was everything that separated him from the men who had frightened her all her life. He wanted to protect her. She could see that instinct in him, fierce and immediate, but wanting was not doing. He looked down at the tablet and touched the file. A crackle of old audio filled the church. Then Carlo Rinaldi's younger voice came through the speaker, smoother, stronger, impatient. "Hale is becoming a problem." Another voice answered, lower and colder. Amara had never heard Silas Crane speak, but she knew before anyone said his name. Some voices sounded like doors closing underground. "Then make him stop reading." Carlo laughed once. "He has a conscience. Accountants with consciences are expensive." Crane's voice remained calm. "Offer him money." "We did." "Then offer him fear." Amara's fingers went numb. Daniel moved closer without touching her. The recording continued. Papers rustled. Carlo spoke again. "He copied records. I don't know where he hid them." Crane said. "He has a daughter." The church blurred. For a moment, Amara was 16 again, standing in a police station in a borrowed coat, while an officer told her the robbery had been random. She remembered the vending machine humming behind her. She remembered her aunt crying into tissues that smelled like perfume. She remembered the plastic bag with her father's wallet inside, his watch, his keys, and the silver locket they said he must have been carrying for her. She remembered thinking that grief did not roar like people said. Sometimes it sat down beside you and removed all sound from the world. Now sound came rushing back in the worst way. Carlo's voice, Crane's voice, her father's name in their mouths. Her own existence turned into leverage before she had even known she was in danger. The recording stopped, not because it ended, because Daniel had paused it. His hand was tight around the tablet. "There is more?" "Yes," Lorenzo said. "Enough." Carlo's voice cracked like a whip. "Enough of this theater. You think I will stand here and let a Moretti accuse me because some dead clerk's daughter found a toy in a necklace?" Amara turned slowly toward him. Dead clerk's daughter. The words should have made her cry. Instead, something inside her settled. Not calm. Something stronger and colder than calm. "My father's name was Thomas Hale," she said. "He liked burnt toast, bad detective shows, and keeping grocery receipts in envelopes, because he said numbers told stories if people stopped lying long enough to read them. He walked me to school in the rain, even when I said I was too old. He sang terribly. He wrote tiny notes in the margins of cookbooks because he thought recipes needed accounting. He was not a dead clerk." Her voice shook now, but it did not break. "He was my father. And you had him killed because he would not help you steal." No one moved. Carlo's face emptied of expression, which was worse than anger. "You know nothing about the world you just entered." "I know files," Amara said. "And men like you always think nobody boring is watching." Daniel looked at her then, and the pride in his eyes nearly undid her. Not soft pride, not the kind that made her feel like a child who had performed bravery. It was respect, full, quiet, equal. She looked away before it could become too much. Isabella's hands trembled around her bouquet. She stared at her father like she was seeing the cane, the suit, the polished shoes, the old family stories all rearrange into something uglier. "Tell them it's not true," she whispered. Carlo did not answer. Her face changed. Humiliation had been bad. Betrayal was worse. For 1 second, Amara saw the woman Isabella might have been without the Rinaldi name wrapped around her throat. Then Isabella looked at Amara and turned the pain into blame, because that was easier than turning it toward her father. "You," she said, "you brought this here." "No," Amara said quietly. "Your family did. I just carried the receipt." Daniel stepped toward the center aisle, tablet in hand. "This marriage is finished. The alliance is finished. Every Rinaldi account touching Moretti money will be frozen before sunset." Carlo laughed, but there was strain under it now. "You no longer control enough of your family to make that promise." His eyes moved toward Valeria. The room followed his gaze. Valeria sat very still. Her face was hard to read, but her silence had become dangerous. Daniel looked at his mother. "Choose carefully." Pain flashed across her face. "Do not speak to me like I am one of your men. Then do not sit silent like one of theirs." That struck deep. Valeria rose, slow and elegant, the way queens in old stories might rise before ordering a war. "For 30 years, she said, I protected this family with choices no one thanked me for. I buried friends. I smiled beside men I knew would betray us if fear loosened for even one day. I raised you to survive, because mercy does not keep sons alive in our world." Daniel's face softened by a fraction. "I know." "No," she said, "you do not. You think love has made you brave today. Perhaps it has. But love also makes men careless. It makes them believe the knife will not fall because their heart is finally warm." Her eyes moved to Amara, not kind, not cruel, something between warning and grief. And outsiders bleed first, when powerful men make romantic choices in public. Amara's throat tightened. She hated that the woman was not entirely wrong. Daniel said, "That is why I am ending this now." Valeria looked at the tablet, then at Carlo, then at Isabella. "If Marco's letter is true, and this evidence is real, then the Rinaldis used my husband's death, my son's duty, and my family's name to build a bridge for our enemies." Carlo's face went dark. "Valeria," she turned on him, "do not say my name as if we share grief." The church shifted again. The Moretti side straightened. The Rinaldi side tightened. Amara could almost see the line between families grow bright across the aisle. Valeria lifted her chin. "Daniel remains head of the Moretti family until this evidence is reviewed by the council." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. That was not a full blessing. It was not an apology. It was a tactical pause wearing a mother's restraint. But in that room, it mattered. Carlo knew it too. His lips thinned. "You are making a mistake." Valeria's smile was small and sharp. "Then at least it will be mine." Before anyone could answer, the church doors opened. A man in a dark coat entered without rushing. That was what made him frightening. He moved through the back of the church with 2 men behind him, not like a guest, not like a soldier, but like someone arriving at a dinner reservation he owned. People turned, whispering. Daniel's hand moved to the inside of his jacket. His guards lifted their attention in one silent wave. Amara did not need anyone to tell her who the man was. Silas Crane was lean, silver-haired, and strangely ordinary, except for his eyes. They were pale, almost colorless, and they did not search the room. They landed exactly where they needed to land. First on Daniel, then on Carlo, then on Amara's locket in Lorenzo's hand. "I hope I am not late," Silas said. His voice was the voice from the recording. Amara felt the old audio crawl across her skin. Daniel turned fully toward him. "You were not invited." "To the wedding? No. To the consequences? I believe I was." Carlo's face had gone stiff, with something very close to panic. Isabella saw it, and her own fear deepened. Silas walked down the aisle slowly, stopping several pews away, wise enough not to come too close. A failed marriage, a family quarrel, a dead man's letter, and a clerk with a necklace. I must say, Daniel, your weddings are more entertaining than your father's. Daniel's voice dropped. Mention my father again, and you will not leave this church. Silas smiled faintly. That is the Moretti temper. Marco had it too. It made him predictable. Amara looked at Daniel quickly. His face had gone cold, but she felt the heat under it. Crane was baiting him. She had worked with records long enough to understand traps. Some were written in contracts. Some stood in aisles and smiled. She touched Daniel's arm, not his hand, his arm, just enough pressure to call him back. He looked down at her. She shook her head once. Not yet. Something moved in his eyes. He heard her. Silas noticed. Of course he did. How sweet, he said. She holds the leash already. Daniel would have answered, but Amara did first. That is a strange comment from a man who came to a wedding uninvited because a woman found his paperwork. The room went still. Silas looked at her, like a knife learning the shape of skin. Amara Hale. The sound of her name in his mouth made Daniel step closer. Amara felt her heart hammering, but her voice survived. Silas Crane. I would say nice to meet you, but I try not to lie in churches. One of Daniel's guards made the same coughing sound again. Silas smiled a little wider. Your father had a mouth too. This time the pain hit low and hard. Daniel saw it and moved, but Amara lifted her hand. Don't. Then she looked at Silas. My father had a spine. That is probably what bothered you. Silas's smile faded. Not fully. Just enough. It was the first tiny win she had earned, and she felt it like a candle lighting in her chest. You have no idea what your father carried, he said. No, she answered. But I'm learning he carried enough to make you come here in person. Daniel looked at Silas with new focus. Amara saw the calculation form in him. Silas had made a mistake. He had come because the chip mattered, not because he wanted drama, not because he enjoyed taunting, because whatever else was on that chip could hurt him badly enough to risk walking into a church full of Moretti guns. Lorenzo seemed to understand at the same time. He slipped the chip from the tablet reader and closed it back inside his fist. Silas's gaze flicked to the movement. There it was, quick, hungry, afraid. Daniel saw it. So did Valeria. So did Amara. And for the first time all day, she felt useful in a way that had nothing to do with being chosen. That chip has more than transfers, Amara said quietly. Daniel did not look away from Silas. Yes. He needs it back. Yes. That means we should not keep standing in the murder church. Daniel blinked once. Murder church? It was a wedding church this morning. Things evolve. Daniel almost smiled again. He leaned closer, voice low. Stay behind me when we move. I will stay beside you if we move. Amara. Daniel. This is not a debate. Everything is a debate when one person is wrong. His jaw tightened. You are impossible, and yet somehow central to the plot. Valeria spoke before Daniel could answer. Lorenzo, take the evidence to the East Room. Leo, Tomas, with him. Daniel, remove the guests. No one leaves, Daniel said. No one important leaves, Valeria corrected. The civilians should not die because the Rinaldis lack shame. It was the first thing Valeria had said all day that sounded almost protective. Amara noticed. She also noticed Valeria did not look at her while saying it. Maybe kindness was still too expensive for the older woman to spend directly. Daniel gave one nod. His men began moving through the pews, quiet and controlled, guiding guests towards side exits away from Silas and the Rinaldis. The priest followed two elderly women with such speed his robes nearly tangled around his shoes. Amara would have laughed if her stomach were not trying to fold in on itself. Isabella remained near the altar, frozen. Her bridesmaids had abandoned formation and gathered like frightened birds in satin. Carlo looked trapped between Daniel and Silas, and the sight of his fear did something strange to Amara. It did not satisfy her as much as she expected. Maybe because his fear had come too late to save her father. Maybe because men like Carlo were never afraid until someone else had already paid the price. Silas watched the guests leave. "How generous," he said, "clearing the innocent before the guilty speak." Daniel replied, "I do not remember giving you permission to speak. You are very like your father. You already tried that." "Yes," Silas said. "And she stopped you." His eyes moved to Amara. "That must be new for you." Listening, Daniel said nothing, but Amara felt the truth of the insult graze him. Daniel was trying. He was learning in real time, in front of enemies, how not to turn protection into command. That did not make him harmless. It made him more dangerous in a way Silas did not understand. A man who could adapt was harder to trap than a man who only knew how to roar. Amara leaned toward Daniel and whispered, "He wants you angry." Daniel's eyes stayed forward. "I know. Good. Because you have a very convincing angry face. Thank you. Not a compliment. I accepted it anyway." Their whisper was absurd. It was also keeping her upright. Silas watched them, and something like irritation flickered in his pale eyes. He had expected fear, maybe tears, maybe Daniel's rage. He had not expected banter in a church full of collapsing alliances. Honestly, Amara had not expected it either. Then the first shot cracked through the stained glass window above the left aisle. The blue angel's face shattered. Colored glass rained down like frozen light. Guests screamed. Daniel grabbed Amara and pulled her behind a marble pillar as two more shots tore into the pews. "I thought no one was supposed to leave," Amara gasped. "That came from outside." "Wonderful. The murder church has expanded." Daniel pressed his body between hers and the aisle. His gun was in his hand now, so fast she had not even seen him draw it. The softness was gone from his face. Not the care, the softness. His men returned fire through the broken window, while others rushed the remaining guests into the side hall. Silas had disappeared behind overturned pews, his men moving with him. Carlo shouted something in Italian. Isabella screamed her father's name. Valeria stood near the front pew with a pistol in one hand, looking less like a mother now and more like the woman who had survived 30 years, beside men who mistook elegance for weakness. Amara stared at her for half a second. "Your mother has a gun." Daniel fired once, toward the back doors. "My mother has several." "That explains a lot about you." "Stay down. I am down." "Lower." "I cannot become flooring, Daniel." He looked at her, and even in the chaos, his eyes searched her face for injury. "Are you hit?" "No." "Are you sure?" "I have a strong sense of being shot, and this is not it." Another bullet struck the pillar, sending chips of marble across Daniel's shoulder. He did not flinch. Amara did. Then she saw Lorenzo across the side aisle, half shielded by Leo, trying to reach the east room with the chip. A Rinaldi guard had broken away and was moving toward him through the confusion. No one else saw. Daniel was focused on the window. Valeria was covering the altar. Leo was firing toward the back. Amara's brain sorted the room. Distance, angles, obstacles, bad choices, worse choices. She grabbed a heavy brass candle holder from the floor. Daniel caught her wrist. "No, Lorenzo." Daniel followed her gaze. His face hardened. He lifted his gun, but the angle was blocked by guests crawling between pews. Amara pulled free and moved before he could stop her. Amara. It was not a command this time. It was fear. She did not run gracefully. She never ran gracefully. She ran with one hand holding up the side of her dress, and the other gripping the candle holder, like a woman prepared to explain herself to God later. The Rinaldi guard reached Lorenzo at the same time she did. He grabbed Lorenzo's arm. Amara swung the candle holder with everything she had. It hit the guard's wrist with a sound that made her teeth hurt. He shouted and dropped his gun. Leo turned, stunned. Lorenzo stared at her. "Go," Amara snapped. "Why do men require so many invitations to survive?" Leo grabbed Lorenzo and shoved him through the east door. The guard turned toward Amara, rage twisting his face. She lifted the candle holder again, though her arms were already shaking. Before he could reach her, Daniel appeared behind him and struck him so hard with the butt of his gun that the man collapsed across the aisle. Daniel caught Amara by the shoulders, eyes blazing. "What did I say?" "Something controlling, probably. You could have been killed. Lorenzo could have lost the chip. You are not replaceable. Neither is evidence. Amara." Daniel. His hands tightened, then loosened immediately, as if he had remembered himself through touch alone. That mattered. Even now, it mattered. "Do not run into gunfire again," he said, lower. She swallowed. "I will try to keep my heroics scheduled." "That is not funny." "It is a little funny." His eyes flashed. "No." The softness in her chest hurt. "Okay," she whispered. "Not funny." A shout came from the back. Silas's men were retreating, not defeated, pulling back because they had failed to grab the chip quickly and did not want to be trapped inside. Daniel turned, fired twice, and one of the men dropped behind the last pew. Another dragged him away through the side door. The shots outside faded into the distance, the church filled with smoke, screams, broken glass, and the strange quiet that comes after violence, pauses but does not end. Daniel kept one hand on Amara's arm, not holding her in place, just needing to know she was still there. She let him, for now. Her own body had begun to shake. The candle holder slipped from her fingers and hit the marble with a loud clang. She stared at it. "I think I assaulted someone with church decor." Daniel looked at her for one long second, then laughed under his breath. Not because anything was funny enough. Because sometimes survival breaks open sideways. Amara laughed too, but hers turned into a shaking breath halfway through. Daniel's face changed. "Come here." He reached for her, then stopped before touching her. Even after gunfire, even after fear, he stopped. "May I?" The question almost destroyed her. She nodded. He pulled her into his arms carefully, one hand around her back, the other at the back of her head, shielding her from the room while not hiding her from herself. She stood there against his chest, listening to his heart. It was not calm. That surprised her. Daniel Moretti's heart was racing. "I'm sorry," he said against her hair. "For what?" "All of it. You did not kill my father." "No." His voice lowered. "But my world did." She closed her eyes. That was too honest to argue with. Around them, men were shouting orders. Valeria was speaking sharply to someone near the altar. Carlo Rinaldi had been surrounded by Moretti guards, his cane gone, his face gray with fury. Isabella sat on the altar steps, veil half torn, staring at the shattered glass, as if the whole world had become unfamiliar. Amara pulled back from Daniel, though she did not move far. "Where is Silas?" "Gone." "That sounds bad." "It is." "Where would he go?" Daniel's eyes turned toward the east door. "To destroy anything the chip points to before we can use it." "The warehouses," Amara said. "Maybe." "No, not maybe." She touched the locket at her throat, then remembered the chain was with Lorenzo. Her fingers closed on empty skin. The file codes inside the locket matched warehouse transfers, Pier 41, Halberd Storage, 2 old Rinaldi properties, and something marked Bellwether. Daniel went very still. "Bellwether?" "Yes." "Why?" His expression darkened. "Bellwether is not a warehouse. It is an old Moretti safe house outside the city." Amara's mouth went dry. "Why would my father have a code for your family safe house?" "I don't know." Valeria approached then, gun lowered but still in hand. "Because Marco hid things there." Daniel turned to her. "What things?" Valeria's jaw tightened. "Things he said were too dangerous to keep in the house." "You knew." "I knew of the place, not the contents." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because after he died, Bellwether was emptied." Lorenzo stepped out of the East Hall, with the tablet clutched against his chest. His face said otherwise. "No," he said. "It wasn't." Valeria turned on him. "Lorenzo." He looked older now, not weaker, just heavy with years of carrying things other people had buried. Marco did not trust anyone near the end. Not fully. Not even me. But the chip contains a second directory, and Bellwether is listed as active. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Active how? A ledger cache, names, payments, meetings, and one locked file labeled Crane's Succession, Silas Crane's Succession. Even people who did not understand the details understood the threat of that. Criminal empires survived by making sure one head could grow back if cut. If Marco had found Crane's succession records, his hidden partners, his judges, his bankers, his next line of command, then the chip was not just proof of old crimes. It was a map to the future of Silas Crane's power. No wonder he had come in person. No wonder men had shot through church windows. Amara felt cold spread through her. "So he will go there," Daniel said. "Yes." "Then we should go first." "No." The word came too fast, too hard. Amara looked at him. Daniel looked back, and both of them knew instantly what had happened. He had done exactly what she feared he would, decided for her, before she had finished speaking. The space between them changed. "Daniel," she said quietly. He closed his eyes once. "Amara, listen to me. That is usually what men say right before asking women to stop talking. This is not about that. Then what is it about?" His control thinned, not into anger, but into fear. "You almost died 10 minutes ago. So did everyone. Because of me. Because of them. Because I brought you into this." Her voice softened despite herself. "No, they were already in my life. I just didn't know their names. You are not going to Bellwether. I know the file codes. Tell me the codes." She shook her head. "No." His eyes flashed. "Do not do this. Do not turn into every man who thinks safety means taking the steering wheel out of my hands." That landed. Hard. Valeria watched them with unreadable eyes. Lorenzo looked away. The broken church seemed too quiet around the argument. Daniel lowered his voice. "I am trying to keep you alive." "I know. Then why are you fighting me?" "Because I want to be alive, not stored." His jaw tightened. She stepped closer, lowering her voice too. "You left that altar because you said you could not marry a lie. Do not ask me to stand beside you and become one. Do not tell everyone I am brave and then hide me the second bravery becomes inconvenient." Daniel stared at her. Pain moved through his face, followed by understanding he clearly hated. "That is not what I meant." "I believe you." Her eyes burned. "That does not make it harmless." For a long moment, Daniel said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded. One nod. Small, costly, real. "You are right." Valeria's eyebrows lifted just slightly, as if she had never heard him say those words in that order. Amara's throat tightened. "I usually am." Her voice came out softer than the joke deserved. Daniel's gaze stayed on hers. "You come because the codes are yours. You stay beside me because I cannot do this without you. But if I tell you to move because there is a bullet coming, you move. Reasonable. If I tell you to duck, you duck. Fine. If I tell you to run, I will consider the context." "Amara." "Daniel, you have to leave me some brand consistency." His mouth almost curved again. Almost. Then he looked at Lorenzo. "How long before Silas reaches Bellwether?" Lorenzo checked the tablet. If he already had men outside the church, he may have sent others as soon as the chip was confirmed. "Distance? 40 minutes by road." Daniel turned to Valeria. "Lock down the estate. Freeze the accounts. Hold Carlo." Carlo shouted from across the room, but Daniel ignored him. "Isabella?" Valeria asked. Daniel looked toward the altar steps. Isabella stared back at him, face pale beneath the veil. She looked ruined and furious, and very young, in a way Amara had not noticed before. "She stays under guard, until we know what she knew. Isabella rose unsteadily. I knew nothing. Her voice cracked. I knew nothing about Crane. Nothing about her father. Nothing about any of this. Daniel studied her. Maybe. The word hurt her. Amara saw it, but Daniel could not afford softness there. Not yet. As Daniel's men moved around them, gathering evidence, securing prisoners, and guiding the last trembling guests into waiting cars, Amara stood in the aisle of the destroyed cathedral and realized her life had split into before and after. Before Daniel's wedding, she had thought the secret in her locket might explain her father's death someday, in some quiet office, through documents, signatures, and patient work. After Daniel's wedding, she understood truth did not always arrive quietly. Sometimes it shattered stained glass and bled into white roses. Daniel returned her locket to her, the chip now copied once and secured by Lorenzo. He placed the chain in her palm instead of fastening it around her neck. "Your choice," he said. She looked at him, then turned and lifted her hair. "Help me." His fingers brushed the back of her neck as he clasped it. The touch was careful, but it still moved through her like warmth after cold rain. "You're shaking," he said. "So are you." "No, I'm not." "Daniel." He glanced down at his hand. It was steady now, but she had felt the truth earlier against her back. "Fine," he said. "I was." "Good." "Good?" "You'd lie if you said you weren't." He looked at her, then he shook his head once, almost smiling. "You are becoming a problem." "I was already a problem. You are becoming aware." They left the church through the east door, away from the broken glass and ruined flowers. Outside, the afternoon had gone gray. Rain threatened but had not yet fallen, hanging over the city like it too was waiting for permission to break. Daniel's black cars lined the narrow side street. Men spoke into earpieces, engines purred. Somewhere in the distance, sirens cried, though Amara doubted the police would arrive before the powerful people had cleaned up enough truth to make reports useless. Daniel opened the back door of the lead car. Amara stopped. "I am not being tucked away in a car and sent somewhere safe. You are getting into this car with me." "Oh, unless you object to the seating." "I object to many things, but leather interiors are not currently high on the list." She got in. Daniel followed. Lorenzo sat in the front passenger seat with the tablet on his lap. Leo drove. Another car pulled ahead, two behind. The convoy moved through the side street and into the city as the church disappeared behind them. For a few minutes, no one spoke. Amara watched rain begin to dot the window. The wedding makeup she had put on so carefully that morning felt strange on her face now, like it belonged to a woman who thought the biggest danger of the day would be seeing Daniel marry someone else. Daniel sat beside her, one hand resting on his knee, the other near his gun. He was not touching her. She noticed. She appreciated it. She also wanted him to touch her, which felt inconvenient and poorly timed. "Tell me about Bellwether," she said. Daniel looked out the window. "It was my father's quiet place." "Mafia bosses have quiet places? Everyone needs somewhere to be less watched." "Even people who enjoy being mysterious near fireplaces?" "Especially them," Lorenzo answered more fully. Bellwether was purchased under a shipping trust before Daniel was born. Old stone house, private road, woods on 3 sides. Marco used it for meetings he did not want the council to know about. Daniel's face tightened. "You knew that?" "I knew some of it. You have been saying that a lot today." Lorenzo accepted the rebuke with a tired nod. Marco made secrecy feel like loyalty. "I am old enough now to know that was not always true." Amara looked between them. "My father must have gone there." Daniel's gaze moved to her. "Maybe." "No. He had the code. He had Crane's records. He knew your father, didn't he?" Lorenzo was quiet for too long. Amara leaned forward. "Lorenzo." The old man looked back at her. "Thomas Hale came to Bellwether twice." The air left Amara's lungs. Daniel turned sharply. You knew her father. I met him, briefly. Marco brought him in quietly. He said Hale had found something in Rinaldi books that touched Crane and Moretti accounts. Your father believed him. Amara's voice was barely there. Why did no one tell me? Lorenzo's eyes filled with old regret. Because after your father died, Marco believed telling you would paint a target on you. I already had a target on me. Yes, Lorenzo said softly. We know that now. Amara sat back slowly. The rain thickened on the glass. For years, she had thought her father's story ended in a random street robbery. Then she thought it ended with Rinaldi greed. Now, it stretched into Daniel's family, Marco's secrets, Bellwether, Crane, and a hidden ledger still waiting in an old house outside the city. It was too much. Grief was supposed to get smaller with time, people said. They lied. Grief did not shrink. It hid in normal life until one detail opened a door, and there it was again, full-sized, patient, wearing your father's coat. Daniel turned toward her. I am sorry. She shook her head. Don't. Amara, if you are sorry too gently, I will cry, and I am wearing mascara from a drugstore brand with no loyalty. He stayed quiet, but his hand moved slowly across the seat, palm up, offered, not taken. She looked at it. Then she placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. That was all. No speech, no promise, no vow in a church. Just one hand holding another, while rain dragged silver lines down the window. The city thinned as they drove north. Buildings gave way to warehouses, then smaller roads, then trees black against the gray sky. Lorenzo worked on the tablet, reading fragments aloud when Daniel asked. Rinaldi transfers, Crane shell names, payments to judges Amara had seen in courthouse records, a medical charity that owned no clinic, a construction company that had won waterfront contracts after 3 suspicious fires. The more they heard, the clearer the pattern became. The Rinaldis had not only stolen from Daniel's empire, they had been helping Silas Crane build a second shadow network inside it, one quiet payment at a time. The marriage to Isabella would have sealed access, trust, and legitimacy. Daniel would have brought the enemy into his house and called it peace. Your father knew, Amara said. Daniel's eyes stayed on the road ahead. He suspected. No, he knew enough to write that letter. And still he died before proving it. The bitterness in Daniel's voice was old. Amara recognized old bitterness. It had a particular sound, like a door that had been slammed too many times to close cleanly. Maybe he proved more than you think, she said. Maybe he just hid it well. Daniel looked at her. You believe that? I believe accountants and fathers both hide things in weird places. Where would your father hide something? Somewhere boring, she said without hesitation. Men with guns search safes. They do not search tax folders labeled depreciation schedules. Lorenzo turned slowly from the front seat. There is an accounting room at Bellwether. Amara blinked. Of course there is. Daniel's eyes sharpened. You think the ledger is there? I think if my father helped hide it, it will not be under a floorboard with dramatic lighting. It will be in a cabinet, so dull everyone feels sad opening it. The smallest smile touched Lorenzo's face. Thomas said something similar once. Amara looked at him quickly. What did he say? Lorenzo's expression softened. He said criminals love secret rooms because they think secrets should feel important. Accountants prefer file drawers because nobody opens them unless forced. Amara's laugh came out broken. That was her father. So painfully her father, that for a second she could almost smell his coffee, hear his keys on the kitchen counter, see him standing at the table with sleeves rolled up and numbers spread in front of him like puzzle pieces. Daniel's hand tightened around hers. She let it. Outside, the road narrowed. Trees crowded closer. Leo slowed the car. The lead vehicle ahead turned onto a private road, half hidden behind iron gates. One gate stood open, not broken, open. Daniel's face went still. Silas is already here. The convoy stopped before the bend. Daniel's men moved with quiet speed, exiting cars, checking weapons, spreading toward the trees. Rain fell steadily now, soft but cold. Bellwether House stood at the end of the road, visible through the branches. Old stone walls, dark windows, ivy climbing one side like fingers. It did not look like the center of a criminal war. It looked asleep. That made it worse. Daniel turned to Amara. "Stay close." She nodded. No joke came. Not this time. He noticed and touched her cheek once with the back of his fingers. "Still with me?" She swallowed. "Unfortunately for both of us. Yes. There she is. Do not sound proud. It encourages me." He leaned closer, and for one breath she thought he might kiss her. He did not. Not because he did not want to. She could see that he did. He stopped because fear and adrenaline were not consent. Because they were standing outside a house where her father's secrets might be waiting beside men willing to kill for them. Because Daniel Moretti, for all his darkness, was learning that restraint could be more intimate than possession. He only said, "When this is over, I am going to ask you something." Her heart tripped. "That sounds terrifying." "It should not be. You underestimate your face." He almost smiled. Then Leo opened the door, and the night air rushed in. They moved toward Bellwether, through wet trees and dim gray light. Amara stayed beside Daniel, not behind him, though his body angled constantly to shield her, without making a show of it. She noticed. She also noticed he was trying not to make her notice. Men like Daniel did not become equal partners in one day, but he was trying, and effort had a sound if you listened closely enough. Near the side of the house, one of Daniel's men found fresh tire tracks in the mud. Another found the cut wires of an old security box. The front door was unlocked. Daniel cursed softly. "They are inside. Would they burn it?" Amara whispered. Lorenzo answered behind them. "If they cannot find what they came for." That moved everyone faster. Daniel entered first, gun raised. Amara followed before fear could talk her out of it. The house smelled like dust, cold stone, and old wood. Sheets covered furniture in the main hall. Rain tapped against tall windows. Somewhere upstairs, something thudded. Daniel lifted one hand, and his men spread silently. Amara looked around, searching not like a soldier, but like a clerk. Important rooms wanted to look important. Marco's office would be obvious. Silas would search there first. Her father's hiding place would not be there. She turned toward a narrow corridor near the back stairs. A counting room. Lorenzo pointed. "This way." The room was small, windowless, and deeply boring. Amara nearly smiled. Metal cabinets lined one wall. Old binders sat in neat rows. A desk held an adding machine, a lamp, and a stack of dust-covered folders, labeled by year. It was perfect. "Dad," she whispered, and the ache in her chest softened into something like love. Daniel watched the hallway while she went to the cabinets. "What are we looking for?" he asked. "Something that looks too boring to matter." "That describes the whole room." "Exactly." She opened the first drawer. Tax records. Property repairs. Fuel logs. She moved quickly but carefully, scanning labels, dates, handwriting. Daniel kept glancing at her, torn between watching the hall and watching her think. "You are very calm," he said. "I am surrounded by folders. This is my natural habitat." A crash sounded upstairs. Daniel turned sharply. Gunfire followed. 2 shots, then shouting. He looked at Amara. She shook her head. "Go if you need to." "No." "Daniel, I am not leaving you." "Then send someone." He signaled to Leo, who disappeared into the hall with 2 men. Amara kept searching. Bottom drawer. Old depreciation schedules. Her fingers stopped. One folder was labeled Weather Damage, 2014. Too plain, too vague, too perfectly dull. She pulled it out. Inside were invoices for roof repair, gutter cleaning, stonework. Beneath them sat a second folder, thin and grey, with her father's handwriting on the tab. Not a title, a sentence. Numbers tell stories. Amara sat down hard in the chair. Daniel was beside her, instantly. What? She opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a printed ledger, a key to shell company names, and a photograph of her father, standing beside Marco Moretti, outside Bellwether. Both men looked tired, both looked alive. A small note was paper-clipped to the first page. Amara recognized the handwriting before she read the words. My Mara, if this reaches you, I am sorry I could not make the world safer before you had to enter it. Her breath broke. Daniel went completely still beside her. The hallway outside filled with footsteps. Not Daniel's men. Too many. Too fast. Amara folded the note into her palm and shoved the ledger against Daniel's chest. Take it. Amara, take it. He did. The door burst open. Silas Crane stood there with rain on his coat and a gun in his hand. His eyes moved from Amara to Daniel to the folder. There it is, he said softly. Daniel stepped in front of Amara. This time she did not argue, because Silas was not insulting her. He was aiming, but she leaned around Daniel just enough to look Crane in the eye. You know, she said, voice shaking but alive. For a man with this many secrets, you are terrible at keeping appointments private. Silas smiled without warmth. And you are very much your father's daughter. Amara's fingers closed around the note in her palm. Daniel raised his gun. Rain tapped against the hidden room's only small window. Somewhere upstairs, another shot rang out, and in that narrow, dusty accounting room, with the past open on the desk and the future balanced between two guns, Amara understood that her father had not only left her evidence, he had left her a choice. Run from the story he died protecting, or finish reading it aloud. Silas Crane smiled with a gun in his hand, and the little accounting room seemed to shrink around the sound of rain against the window. Daniel stood between him and Amara, shoulders wide, gun raised, the old ledger pressed tight beneath his left arm. The folder her father had hidden was open on the desk behind them, the note still warm in Amara's fist, and for one strange second she thought about how ordinary the room looked. Metal cabinets, dusty binders, a dead lamp, a chair with one uneven leg. This was not how secrets were supposed to feel. Secrets were supposed to hide in vaults, behind paintings, inside black cars moving through the night. But her father had hidden the truth in a room no proud criminal wanted to search, and now the most dangerous men in the city had come chasing a folder labeled like bad weather. Silas looked at Daniel first, but his eyes did not stay there. They drifted past him to Amara, pale and calm and terribly patient. Thomas Hale had the same look at the end, he said, like a good sentence might save him. Daniel's finger tightened near the trigger. Keep her father's name out of your mouth. Silas sighed. That is the trouble with sons and daughters. They think grief makes them noble, when most of the time it only makes them predictable. Amara stepped slightly to the side, just enough to see his face around Daniel's shoulder. Daniel shifted with her, trying to shield her without shoving her back. Even now, even with a gun pointed at them, she felt him fighting himself. The part of him that wanted to lock her behind him. The part that remembered she had asked to stand beside him. You talk a lot for a man who came here to steal one folder, she said, and she was proud that her voice only shook a little. Silas's eyes moved fully to her. I came to correct a mistake. You made several. You may need a notebook. Your father should have taken the money. The words hit hard, but not hard enough to break her. Maybe because she had already heard his voice on the recording. Maybe because the first wound had been survived, and every wound after that was only proof she was still standing. He was bad at taking dirty money, Amara said. Family flaw. Silas tilted his head. And yet you stand beside Daniel Moretti. I said dirty money, not dramatic men with terrible timing. Daniel's mouth moved, barely. Silas did not smile. Good. Amara liked him better without the smile. It made him look less like a gentleman and more like what he was. "You think this is charm," Silas said. "This little mouth of yours. This refusal to understand the size of the room you are in." Amara's fingers curled tighter around her father's note. "No, I understand the room. I understand you came personally because the ledger can ruin you. I understand you need Daniel angry enough to shoot first, because then this becomes mafia violence instead of evidence. I understand Carlo was never your partner. He was your hallway, and I understand you keep looking at my hand, which means you know I took something from the folder before Daniel did." For the first time, Silas's face changed. It was tiny, but she saw it. So did Daniel. His eyes flicked once to her fist, then back to Silas. Daniel's voice lowered. "What did you take?" "A note," Amara said. "Maybe more. Maybe not. I do panic with flair." Daniel breathed out once, sharp and almost amused, but he did not drop his aim. Silas's gun lifted by a fraction. "Give me the note, Amara." "Absolutely not. I will not ask again." "Good. Repetition wastes time." The shot came from the hallway, not Silas's gun. One of Daniel's men crashed against the doorframe behind him, shouting, and the room exploded into motion. Daniel fired once, not at Silas's chest, but at the shelf above him. Glass jars and old metal parts crashed down. Silas ducked. Daniel grabbed Amara around the waist and pulled her behind the desk as a bullet ripped through the cabinet where her shoulder had been a heartbeat earlier. "I told you to duck when I said duck," Daniel snapped. "You did not say duck. I was about to. Next time lead with the useful verb." The argument came out wild and breathless, while bullets slammed into metal drawers. Daniel shoved the ledger under his jacket, keeping his body over hers as splinters rained across the floor. Amara's heart was beating so hard it made everything bright at the edges. She could smell dust, rain, gun smoke, and Daniel's cologne, clean and dark and completely unfair, in the middle of attempted murder. He looked down at her. "Are you hit?" "No." "Sure. Still have the strong sense of being shot?" "Yes." "Amara, I'm not hit." His hand brushed over her arm anyway, fast and careful, checking because fear had made him human again. She let him, then grabbed his wrist. "The side cabinet." "What?" "My father would have left a second exit plan. This is not an apartment. It is a house for criminals with secrets. There is always a weird door." Daniel stared at her for half a second, then looked toward the cabinets. A bullet hit the desk. He fired twice over the edge, forcing Silas back into the hall, then kicked the bottom panel of the side cabinet. It did not move. Amara crawled toward it before he could stop her. "Amara, I am low. This is technically following instructions." She ran her fingers under the metal frame, found a hidden latch, and nearly laughed from fear and triumph when the back of the cabinet clicked open into a dark service passage. "Dad, you beautiful paranoid accountant," she whispered. Daniel looked at the opening, then at her. "Remind me never to underestimate boring rooms." "That reminder is now unnecessary." He pushed her through first, then followed, dragging the cabinet closed behind them, just as Silas entered the room. For 3 seconds, they crouched in total darkness. Amara could hear her own breathing, Daniel's breathing, and Silas on the other side of the wall. "Find them," Silas said softly, "and burn the rest if you have to." Footsteps moved away. Daniel's hand found Amara's in the dark. "Still with me?" he whispered. "I am in a wall with you, so yes, tragically. Can you move? I can complain and move. Then do both quietly. You ask for miracles." The passage was narrow, old and cold, built between the accounting room and the outer stone wall. They moved sideways through it, Daniel behind her now because there was no room for him to pass. Amara kept one hand on the rough wood, the other wrapped around her father's note. There were moments when grief came like a storm. Then there were moments like this, where grief became a lantern. Her father had been here. Her father had known men might come. Her father had hidden the truth, not like a coward, but like a parent trying to give his daughter one more chance, years after his voice was gone. At the end of the passage, they reached a small iron door. It opened into a pantry near the kitchen. The house beyond was chaos. Daniel's men and Silas's men shouted from opposite wings. Glass broke upstairs. Smoke had begun to curl from under a distant doorway. "He's burning the office," Daniel said. "The ledger?" Amara asked. Daniel touched the inside of his jacket. "With me." "The chip?" "Lorenzo." "The note." She lifted her fist. Daniel looked at it. "You still haven't read it." Her throat tightened. "I read the first line." "Then do not read the rest here. You say that like we are going to find a cozy chair. We are going to find Lorenzo, get out, and destroy Crane with what we have." Amara looked toward the hall, where smoke thickened. "And Bellwether?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "If it burns, it burns. Your father hid truth here, and your father died for it. I am not letting the house become more important than the living." That landed softly, in a place she had not expected. She nodded. That was almost healthy. "Do not sound surprised." "I am always surprised when Mafia therapy happens under gunfire." They found Lorenzo in the old library, blood running from a cut above his eyebrow, tablet clutched under one arm. Valeria Moretti standing beside him, with a gun steady in both hands. Amara blinked. "How did you get here?" Valeria looked at her as if the question itself was rude. "I followed my son. Through a gunfight. I have been following Moretti men into danger since before you owned proper shoes. My shoes are fine." Daniel stepped between them before the conversation could become stranger. "Where is the backup copy?" Lorenzo tapped his chest pocket. "With me." "Good. We leave now." Valeria looked at the smoke seeping into the hall. Crane set fire to the east study. Daniel cursed. "He wants the house gone. He wants to bury Marco twice," Lorenzo said. That sentence made something terrible move across Daniel's face. Then Amara heard footsteps behind the library shelves. Too quiet, too close. "Daniel," she whispered. He turned as Silas stepped from the shadows with Isabella in front of him, one arm locked around her throat, a gun pressed against her side. Her white dress was torn at the hem and smeared with ash. Her veil was gone. For the first time since Amara had met her, Isabella did not look polished. She looked terrified. "I found another bride," Silas said. "This one came wandering through the hall looking for her father." Isabella's eyes found Daniel. "He left me," she whispered. "Carlo had run. Of course he had. Men like him always confused family with property until danger came to collect." Daniel's gun rose. So did Valeria's. Silas pressed his weapon harder into Isabella's ribs. "Careful. You are sentimental today." Isabella made a small sound. Amara hated her. Not fully. Not anymore. She hated the things Isabella had said, the way she had looked at her body like it was a stain on the wedding floor, the way she had tried to turn humiliation into cruelty. But seeing her held in front of Silas as a shield made all that anger complicated and ugly. Nobody deserved to become a human door. "Let her go," Daniel said. "Give me the ledger, the chip, and the note." Silas's eyes slid to Amara. "All three. Then everyone still breathing may remain that way." Valeria's voice was cold. "You will kill us either way." "Probably," Silas said. "But people do enjoy bargaining with hope." Isabella shook her head as much as his grip allowed. "Daniel, don't." Her voice broke. "Don't give it to him." Silas's mouth tightened. "That is not your line." "No," Isabella said, tears cutting through ash on her face. "I think it is the first line I have ever chosen myself." Amara looked at her. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Not friendship. Not forgiveness. Something rawer. Recognition. Both of them had been dressed up in someone else's plan that morning. Only one of them had known it. Amara looked at the fireplace beside the library wall. A half-burned log had rolled onto the hearth. Beside it sat an old brass coal shovel. Not as elegant as a candle holder, but apparently her new life involved weaponizing decor. She shifted her weight. Daniel noticed without looking. His hand lowered by half an inch. He trusted her. Not completely, because trust in a gunfight was less romantic than people imagined, but enough. She took one breath and let her face crumble. Not fake enough to be obvious, just enough. "Please," she said to Silas, and allowed her voice to shake. "Please, don't hurt her." Daniel's eyes flicked to her, startled by the tone. Silas smiled slowly, pleased. Men like him loved begging. It made them feel tall. "There she is," he said. "The clever mouth learns softness." Amara took a tiny step closer to the hearth. "I'll give you the note." Daniel's body went rigid. "Amara." She did not look at him. "It's my father's. It's mine to give." Silas watched her carefully, slowly. She opened her fist. The folded note sat damp and wrinkled in her palm. Silas's eyes dropped to it. 1 second. That was all. But 1 second was sometimes where the whole future lived. Amara kicked the burning log with the side of her shoe. It rolled off the hearth towards Silas. He jerked Isabella backward. Daniel fired, not at Silas, but at the gun in his hand. The shot hit metal and bone. Silas shouted. Isabella dropped. Valeria fired next, clean and brutal, hitting Silas in the shoulder. Daniel crossed the room in 3 strides and slammed him against the bookshelves before he could recover. Silas hit the floor with Daniel's gun at his throat. For a moment, Daniel looked exactly like the monster the city believed he was. Cold, beautiful, ready. Silas laughed through pain. "Do it," he rasped. "Show her what you are." The room went still. Smoke curled near the ceiling. Rain beat against the windows. Amara knew this was the trap, the oldest one. Not a legal trap, not a tactical one. A soul trap. Silas wanted Daniel to end him in a burning house. Wanted the story to become blood instead of truth. Daniel's hand did not shake. That was what scared her. "Daniel," she said. He did not look away from Silas. "He killed your father," Silas whispered. "Carlo gave the order on your girl's father. Yes. But Marco? That was mine. He found too much. He always did. I had him stopped on the road outside Naples. Simple, clean. You should thank me. He would have made you weak." Daniel's face emptied. Valeria made a sound behind him, small and wounded, the sound of 30 years breaking open. Lorenzo closed his eyes. Amara stepped closer. "Daniel." Silas smiled through blood. "There it is. The truth. Take it." Daniel pressed the gun harder beneath his jaw. "I should." "Yes," Silas whispered. "You should." Amara's voice softened. "Look at me." He did not. "Daniel, look at me." This time he did. The pain in his eyes almost knocked the breath from her. Not rage. Pain. A son hearing his father die all over again. A man being invited to become the worst version of his grief. Amara held his gaze. If you kill him now, he gets to become the ending. Don't give him that. Daniel's jaw worked. He deserves it. Maybe. But your father deserves the truth louder than this man deserves your bullet. Silas's smile faded. Daniel looked down at him. 1 second passed. Then another. Then Daniel pulled the gun away and struck Silas across the face with it, hard enough to knock him unconscious. "That was not murder," Amara said faintly. "I am counting that as growth." Daniel breathed once, rough and uneven. "Do." Then he stood, turned, and went straight to his mother. Valeria had not moved. Her gun hung at her side. Her face looked stripped of all its sharpness. "He killed Marco," she whispered. Daniel took the gun from her hand before it could fall. "Yes." She looked at him, and for the first time all day, she did not look like the Moretti matriarch. She looked like a woman who had lost her husband again in front of witnesses. I blamed weakness. I blamed mercy. I blamed every choice he made that was not hard enough. But he was trying to save us. Daniel's voice softened. I know. Valeria looked past him to Amara. The apology was not there yet. Not fully, but something had cracked open where pride had been. Isabella stumbled to her feet with Lorenzo's help. Her eyes were red, her dress ruined, her hands shaking. My father knew? She asked. No one answered quickly. That was answer enough. She looked at Amara. The silence stretched. What I said to you at the church, Isabella whispered. It was cruel. Amara swallowed. Yes. Isabella flinched. Maybe she had expected polite forgiveness, because wealthy women often did. Amara had no polite forgiveness left in her shoes. Isabella nodded slowly. I wanted you to be the reason everything hurt. Her voice broke. Because if it was you, then it was not my family. Not me. Not the life I agreed to. Amara looked at the smoke-filled doorway, then back at her. I get wanting an easier villain. Isabella laughed once, bitter and wet. You were never easy. That is also what my landlord says. The house groaned above them. Fire had reached the upper hall. Daniel snapped back into command. We leave now. His men dragged Silas out. Lorenzo carried the tablet and copy. Valeria walked beside Isabella, one hand at her back, guiding her through the smoke, as if old enemies could become temporary survivors when the ceiling began to fall. Amara clutched her father's note and followed Daniel through the kitchen passage toward the back door. The smoke burned her throat. Halfway down the hall, a beam cracked overhead. Daniel turned and lifted his arm over her head as sparks fell. She stumbled into him. He caught her. Still not fragile, she coughed. Currently flammable, though. Move. That one I accept. They burst out into the rain as the first upper window blew outward behind them. Cold air hit Amara's face. Daniel pulled her across the muddy yard toward the cars, while flames licked behind the old stone windows. Bellwether burned, but not before giving up its dead. Daniel's men secured Silas in one car, Isabella and Valeria in another, Lorenzo in the lead vehicle, with the evidence pressed beneath his coat. Amara stood in the rain, staring at the house, until Daniel came beside her. I'm sorry, he said. It feels wrong to leave it. Your father built an exit. So did yours. The thought made her chest ache. She unfolded the note with shaking hands beneath the shelter of Daniel's coat as he held it over both of them. The ink had smudged at one corner but survived. My Mara, if this reaches you, I am sorry I could not make the world safer before you had to enter it. I tried. I failed in ways you may one day understand, but never blame yourself for. If you are reading this, then the truth has found you, and I hate that it had to. Do not let powerful men tell you courage means becoming hard. Your softness, your humor, your stubborn heart, these are not weaknesses. They are proof they did not win. Trust numbers. Trust patterns. Trust the part of you that notices when a story does not add up. And when the time comes, do not carry the truth alone. Find someone who can stand beside you without needing to stand in front of you. I love you more than every number I ever learned how to count. Dad. By the time she finished, she was crying. Not prettily, not softly. She was crying in the rain, with smoke in her hair and mud on the edge of her dress. And Daniel Moretti, the most feared man in the city, stood beside her, holding his coat over her head like the weather mattered after everything else. He did not tell her not to cry. He did not say her father would be proud, though maybe he was thinking it. He only stood there, beside her, not in front, not behind, and somehow that made the note hurt less. When she finally lowered the paper, Daniel said, he was right. Amara wiped her face with the back of her hand. About numbers? About you. She gave a wet laugh. Careful. I am emotionally unstable and may accept compliments. Accept this one. His voice was low. You saved my life before you knew me. You saved my family after they judged you. You saved me from killing a man who wanted to turn my grief into his last victory. You are not an accident in my world, Amara. She looked up at him through the rain. Then what am I? His eyes held hers, the truth that walked in wearing comfortable shoes. A laugh broke through her tears before she could stop it. That is the worst romantic line I have ever loved. Daniel's face softened. I will improve. Please don't. I'm not sure my heart can handle competence. The days after Bellwether did not become peaceful. Stories like theirs did not soften just because one villain was captured in the rain. Silas Crane survived his wounds and woke in a guarded Moretti medical room to find that Daniel had not killed him, which turned out to be much worse. The ledger, chip, recordings, and Thomas Hale's hidden codes moved through channels Daniel trusted, then through channels Silas could not touch. Judges resigned before being arrested. Accounts froze before money could disappear. Warehouses were raided. Rinaldi companies collapsed under the weight of their own ledgers. Carlo Rinaldi was found 2 nights later, trying to flee through a private airfield with diamonds sewn into his coat lining, which Amara said was tacky, even for a criminal. Isabella gave testimony. Not kindly, not gently, but truthfully. She named the rooms she had seen, the conversations she had ignored, the signatures she had been told not to question. In doing so, she ruined what remained of her father's power. Maybe she did it for justice. Maybe revenge, maybe survival. Amara decided people could begin in ugly places and still walk in useful directions. The city devoured the wedding scandal, first because the city loved spectacle. Daniel Moretti leaves Mafia bride at altar for plus-size records clerk. Daniel Moretti chooses outsider over empire. Mystery woman destroys Rinaldi alliance. Amara learned very quickly that people who knew nothing about her had endless energy for opinions. Some called her brave, some called her lucky, some called her names with too much hunger behind them. A talk show host laughed about Daniel's taste until Daniel's lawyers, Valeria's social connections, and Amara's own sharp public statement made him apologize so fast his smile looked sprained. Isabella, still furious and wounded, gave one final interview before disappearing from public life for a while. The interviewer tried to make her insult Amara again. Isabella sat there in a black dress, eyes cool, and said, Amara Hale did what most of us were too frightened or too trained to do. She told the truth in a room that hated her for it. Amara watched the clip 3 times, then turned off her phone before she could forgive too quickly. Some apologies needed time to become safe. Valeria's apology came on a quiet morning, 2 weeks after Bellwether, in Daniel's estate garden, where rain had left the stone paths dark and shining. Amara had been sitting on a bench with a notebook on her lap, helping Lorenzo organize the Thomas Hale Foundation for Civic Records Integrity, a name Daniel had suggested and Amara had mocked until she cried. Valeria approached without guards, wearing a dark green coat and no pearls. That alone felt meaningful. She stopped beside the bench. May I sit? Amara looked up. The question surprised her. Yes. Valeria sat with the posture of a woman who could make even humility look expensive. For a while, they watched water drip from the hedges. I judged you, Valeria said. Amara did not soften it for her. Yes, by your body. Your background, your lack of name in our world. By every foolish measure, I told myself I was too intelligent to use. Amara closed the notebook slowly. Valeria's voice remained steady, but her hands were folded too tightly in her lap. I thought you were a threat to my son because you did not belong in the life I built around him. I did not ask whether that life was suffocating him. I did not ask whether belonging was the same as safety. And I did not ask who you were before deciding what you were worth. The garden felt very still. Amara looked at the older woman and saw the cost of every word. It did not erase the hurt. But it mattered that Valeria was paying it herself. "You hurt me," Amara said. "I know. Not more than other people have, but differently, because Daniel loved you, and part of me wanted you to see what he saw, without me having to prove it in a burning house." Valeria closed her eyes briefly. "I am sorry." Amara let the apology sit between them without rushing to clean it up. Then she said, "I accept that you are sorry. Full forgiveness may need coffee and several months of improved behavior." Valeria looked at her. Then, to Amara's surprise, she smiled. A real one. Small, but real. "That seems fair. Also, if you ever call me unsuitable again, I will make direct eye contact while marrying your son in something with sequins." Valeria's smile deepened. "I will consider myself warned." Daniel proposed again 1 month later, not in a church, not in front of families, not with alliances watching from the pews. He took Amara to the closed bakery, where they had once sat across from each other and argued about loveless marriages under soft yellow light. The owner left them alone, with fresh bread, 2 coffees, and a pastry Daniel claimed not to want, but kept glancing at, like it had insulted him. Amara wore a blue dress with pockets. Daniel wore no tie. That felt important. "You are nervous," she said, watching him stir coffee he would not drink. "No. You have moved that spoon 12 times. He set it down. "You count things when you are nervous too. I am a records professional. It is charming when I do it." He looked at her across the small table, and the warmth in his eyes made the whole room feel too intimate for jokes. "The first time I asked you to stand beside me, I was running from a lie." Amara's heart went still. "Daniel, let me finish. That sounds serious." "It is. Fine. But if you make me cry into pastry, you owe me another." His mouth curved. "Agreed." He reached into his coat and took out a small velvet box, but he did not open it yet. He only set it on the table between them, like a question, not a demand. "That day, I chose you honestly, but not peacefully. There was fear, anger, betrayal, and half the city watching. You were right not to let that become our beginning. You were right to refuse becoming a trophy for my rebellion or a weapon against my family. So I am asking now, away from the altar, away from threats, away from everyone who thinks love should prove something to them." He opened the box. The ring inside was not enormous. It was beautiful, warm gold with a deep blue stone that reminded her of the one in her father's locket. Her breath caught. "I love you," Daniel said. "Not because you saved me, not because you exposed them, not because you made my life cleaner or easier, because you have made it much more complicated." Amara laughed through sudden tears. "Accurate. I love you because you see me without bowing to the worst parts of me, because you stand beside me even when standing there costs you, because you remind me that power without tenderness is only fear wearing a suit. And because when I start deciding instead of asking, you look at me like you are willing to fight me for my own soul." Her tears spilled. He smiled softly. "Will you marry me, Amara Hale? Not today. Not because anyone is watching. Not as an alliance. Not as proof. Only because you choose me with a clear heart." Amara stared at the ring, then at him. She thought about the church, the gunfire, the burning house, the note in her father's handwriting, Valeria's apology, Isabella's trembling truth, Lorenzo's quiet loyalty, and Daniel standing in the rain holding his coat over her while she cried. She thought about every room where she had been made to feel like too much, too loud, too big, too strange, too ordinary, to be wanted without explanation. Then she looked at the man across from her, dangerous to the world, careful with her, still flawed, still learning, still choosing. "Yes," she whispered. Daniel closed his eyes like the word had gone through him. "Yes, yes, but with conditions." His eyes opened. "Of course. I am not giving up my work. I would not ask. I get my own office." Done. With windows. Done. No bodyguards hovering in bathrooms, dressing rooms, or any place where I may need to insult myself in peace. We will negotiate wording. Daniel. Done. And when you forget to ask instead of decide, I reserve the right to call you an emotionally overdressed bulldozer. He slid the ring onto her finger with hands that were almost steady. Accepted. She looked at the blue stone through her tears. Also, I am eating your pastry. I bought it for you. No, you bought it while pretending not to want it. That is different. He leaned across the table and kissed her then, slowly, carefully, like they had all the time in the world and had fought hard enough to deserve one quiet minute of it. Their wedding, months later, was nothing like the first one. There were no rival families arranged like loaded weapons. No bride chosen by treaty. No white roses pretending innocence. Amara walked down a garden aisle beneath warm lights, wearing a dress that made her feel beautiful without asking her to shrink, with her father's locket pinned close to her heart, and Daniel waiting at the end like a man who had survived his own legend. Valeria cried once and denied it immediately. Lorenzo walked Amara halfway down the aisle because she asked him to, and because some debts of love are not paid by blood. Isabella sent a handwritten note and did not attend, which Amara respected more than a dramatic appearance. The city still called Daniel Moretti feared. That did not change. Men still lowered their voices when he entered rooms. Enemies still counted exits when they heard his name. But those closest to him began noticing other things. He laughed more, though not loudly. He asked before ordering when asking mattered. He came home earlier, on nights when Amara cooked badly, and insisted the burnt edges were flavor. He built the Thomas Hale Foundation into a place where clerks, auditors, and overlooked people could bring evidence without being buried by it. Amara ran it with sharp eyes, soft cardigans, and enough sarcasm to terrify men who thought kindness meant weakness. In the end, the empire did not fall because Daniel chose love over a lie. It became harder to poison. Valeria learned that loyalty without truth was only fear aging in a beautiful room. Daniel learned that protecting someone meant standing close enough to help, not so close that they disappeared behind you. And Amara learned that belonging was not something handed down by family names, dress sizes, bloodlines, or polished rooms full of people deciding who deserved to be seen. Belonging could be chosen, built, defended. Sometimes it could begin with an ambush, a crushed muffin, and a man bleeding near your shoes. Sometimes it could survive a ruined wedding, a burning house, and a dead father's secret waiting patiently in a dull gray folder. Years later, people would still tell the story wrong. They would say Daniel Moretti left a Mafia princess at the altar for an outsider. They would say Amara Hale stumbled into power by accident. They would say love made him weak. But those who knew the truth understood better. Daniel had not lost an empire for Amara. He had found the courage to stop worshipping one. Amara had not been rescued from an ordinary life. She had carried the truth into a room that thought it could shame her into silence, and made every powerful person there listen. And when the world turned against them, they did not become perfect. They became partners, hand in hand, voice beside voice. Not a monster and his prize, not a king and his decoration, just Daniel and Amara, standing together at the edge of power, proving every day that real loyalty was never about blood, beauty, or fear. It was choosing the person who stood with you when the whole room wanted you to stand alone.